If you could take your seats, please, we'll start the breakout session. This is Rethinking Your Security Strategy, How to Establish a Security-Aware Organization Culture. Please welcome to the stage Theo Zafirakos. Theo.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about how to establish a cybersecurity-aware culture within your organization. Oh, I'll need my clicker. Excuse me. All right. So if we can move the slides along, I will need a clicker for moving the slides. So, rethinking the security-aware strategy. A little bit about our organization. We are a Fortress Terranova Security. We specialize in delivering cybersecurity-aware cultures by delivering products and services to organizations. Myself, I've been in the cybersecurity field for over 25 years, and I have worked with hundreds of organizations over the last years in helping them implement these cybersecurity programs. All right. So, how do we establish this cybersecurity-aware culture? And when we talk about cybersecurity, we have to remember that we're dealing with the human aspect of cyber and technology. Whether we're talking about our adversaries or our allies, there's always a human element behind it. While we cannot control what the attackers do, the threat actors, we have a little bit of control or the ability to influence what our allies do, our employees, our partners, our suppliers, in some cases, even our clients. So that's why it's important to have an understanding of what motivates them, what makes them tick, what interests them to help them adopt these cybersecurity best practices. We will share with you some data, some information that we've collected through different surveys and activities, because data provides a lot of information to cybersecurity leaders when it comes time to implement and prepare their programs. We often get questions, well, how do I compare to others? What are others are doing? What are some of the best practices? Am I as good or worse than my colleagues or my peers in the industry? And cybersecurity data is a bit difficult to collect because a lot of organizations want to keep the data confidential. Sometimes it's sensitive in nature. They don't want to share it out in the public. But what if we could collect data in anonymous format, correlate it, and produce the data? How could that help? How could it provide some information that is actionable for cybersecurity leaders and practitioners in establishing their programs? First question is there anybody in the room that is not in cybersecurity or IT technology in a different field? There's one person, and there's one person from the audience. Welcome, you're pretty brave. And what possessed you to join this session? Good, good. And as we heard it several times throughout the presentation, cybersecurity is not just an IT problem, it's a business problem. And cybersecurity leaders have to do more in engaging more the business when it comes to cybersecurity. So the first thing that we did is, over the summer, we conducted a survey across 5 countries across the world. We leveraged Ipsos to ask different individuals, ages 18 to 75, who are employed, what they feel, and what they think their responsibility is when it comes to cybersecurity. So across North America, we had about 2,500 participants. We had 500 in the UK, 500 in France, and Australia. And while presenting you the Canadian data today, you will see how the data varies across each of the regions because of the cultural differences in each one of the regions. So first, how will this information help leaders? Once we understand what motivates our employees, what interests them, what concerns them, we could start helping them by designing program and communicating to them in a way it works. Right? I don't know how many of you saw the presentation by Jeff Whitman from Black Hat when he talked about the 4 principles of communicating to executives. Well, you could apply those 4 principles when communicating to your users or anybody else within your organization. Understand what motivates them, what interests them, what's in it for them. You'd be surprised on how many individuals believe that it's okay to share my password with someone I trust because it's someone I know. No, it's never acceptable to share your password, right? Through surveys, we've seen that users are willing to bypass security controls that are in place if it helps them achieve their objectives. Their intentions are good, they're noble. They want to produce this quarterly report. It's okay if I send the data in my personal email account so I could work from it from home, right? Now with cloud solutions, we've made it a lot easier to collaborate and work remotely, but still in many cases, users may unintentionally, they're not meaning to make harm, but they're bypassing controls because they're impeding their work. Very important to understand what motivates them. And understanding why do they have gaps. Is the topic too complicated? Is it not interesting? Or is it not relevant? So learning how to adapt the topic to the audience becomes very important. And also, we need to position our organization to grow in culture. And not just all your end users, at all levels of the organization. Culture starts at the very top. And before we look at security culture, we also have to look at organizational culture. Is cybersecurity a top priority for the organization? So looking at the report, we noticed that from the respondents that more than three quarters reported that they've been targeted by attack or they know someone who has. The other 24% are just not aware of it yet, right? So nobody could deny that this is no longer a threat, it cannot affect me. And we cannot say either, well, my data is out there, I give up, I don't care anymore. No, we have to stay proactive and preventing from these cyber threats hitting us. And only a third of the employees rate their organization's knowledge or capabilities as very good, like 8 out of 10 or higher. They think that our organization is not doing enough or is not communicating enough when it comes to cybersecurity. And that is true because in the security field, we tend to be not very good at marketing what they do, communicating with the rest of the organization some of the benefits and the added value that cybersecurity brings to the organization. So as cybersecurity leaders, we have to have also a bit of marketing skills to promote the benefits that cybersecurity brings within the organizations and what we have in place. Also, less than that, rate your colleagues' knowledge as knowledgeable. And remember that what you think of others, they are likely think the same thing of you. So a disaster from that perspective that nobody thinks that anybody knows anything within the organization. And also that we've seen that a lot of organizations don't have mandatory training in place. For some reason, organizations tend to hesitate not to bother or their employees or add additional burden by asking them to take training because they're going to get upset, they don't want to do it. Well, that is not acceptable. When you give your employees access to digital information, technology, you also have a responsibility to teach them the risks associated with that use and technology. Don't assume that they've learned anything in school from their government or at home from their parents, right? So sometimes it becomes the organization's responsibility to educate and train their employees. And if the training is not mandatory, then employees don't take it seriously, they don't need to complete it. It doesn't mean that you have to have 2 or 3 hours of mandatory training for every single employee, but certain components, certain activities, you would expect users to follow to complete and acknowledge having completing the activities. If organizations have struggled, some organizations have struggles implementing that training program, well, we recommend starting with your new hires. There's no reason why the new hires that are coming in cannot be trained with certain essentials where they start off with that information from the very beginning. Also, over the half of the employees, they believe that cyber threats have increased with the hybrid work environment when working from home. And it becomes more difficult and more challenging also for cybersecurity leaders to communicate with those individuals because now they're at home, they may not have access to all the same tools or information, or it becomes a little bit more difficult. We don't have that in-person social interaction where if I notice something over here, I don't know what to do. Maybe I look over my cubicle and I ask my colleague, did you send me this? Did you receive this? Is this legitimate? It becomes a little bit more time-consuming when we're remote, and I have to use Teams or something else to chat with my colleagues to find out if it's legitimate. I may not even take the time to do that. Also, when we're working remotely, there's other distractions at home, like a hungry child, a barking dog, where we may act a bit too quickly responding on our phone or another device where we don't have all the necessary tools to detect whether this was a legitimate or a suspicious message. And also, cybersecurity is mostly associated with IT teams. 77% of the Canadians believe that it's IT responsibility to protect us from everything, and they're going to put the controls in place that are going to defend us, which is not the case. Although technology could stop 95% of the attacks keep evolving. Especially with the evolution of artificial intelligence, AI, we are going to see more and more attacks being sophisticated, well-tailored, replicating a specific entity, trusted entity, much better, much easier. The creation of deep fakes, where users may believe that somebody is saying something where it's not the person. So a lot of that, we won't have the technology in time to prevent and stop those attacks. So where do they end up? They end up in front of the user's eyes. And does the user have the capacity and the capability to detect what is happening and act accordingly? And we'll see that with the second activity we did, the global phishing simulation event. The users still don't know how to detect a phishing website. So every user, every person has a role to play. And also, when you're at home, you don't have an IT department. Who's responsible for protecting your home environment? You are the IT administrator of your home environment. You have to know how to protect your network, your Wi-Fi, and every other device that connects to it. And in some cases, it includes your corporate device that connects into this personal network. So yes, IT has a responsibility, but so do you. So how do we support employees as organizations to help them learn? They say that their employees are interested in having cybersecurity awareness training in their organization because, and it would help if it was mandatory because then it would show them that the organization is serious about it. But it has to be interesting. It has to be relevant to what they do. Do not teach me about things that I do not care about. Be careful how you communicate the message. Right. We had a client at one point come to us and say, well, I need to train my employees on using two-factor authentication. Well, okay, fine. What are you going to say? Well, that they have to use it and how it works in the background. Well, what do the users care? They don't. They just prompted for a password, they enter the password, the code, that's it, it's over. But what if they receive an unsolicited request for their code? What does that mean? How do they react? Right? Depending how you've implemented it, does it mean that your password has been compromised and the attacker has reached the second stage? Well, this is information that is relevant to the user, saying if you receive your code and it's not unsolicited, don't respond. Maybe you have to go change your password. Alert the help desk. So making the information relevant and actionable to the employees. Don't just communicate for the sake of providing additional information. So that was the first report we've completed, and we have a lot more data that is available in a hard copy and online report. The second activity that we did was at the Gone Fishing Tournament. The Gone Fishing Tournament is done, this was the fourth year we did it. It's co-sponsored with Microsoft. As partners of Microsoft, they give us several scenarios that they see that the users receive the most, and out of that, we create one scenario that we deploy globally. So this year was the largest ever one-time simulation done. We should have put it in the Guinness Book of Records, with over 1.2 million people being fished at the same time with the same simulation in the language in their native language. And what this does is it gives us information that allows us to benchmark ourselves. A lot of organizations say, well, I want to benchmark with my peers in the financial industry. How are my click rates? Well, click rates within organizations are not something that security leaders are going to share publicly or sometimes even in their colleagues because it exposes you on how weak you are. But what if you could do it anonymously? Whereas, we get the data, we correlate it, and you compare yourself without anybody else knowing what your data is. So this provides you some data on performance benchmark. But what we tell our clients is before you do performance benchmarking, start with doing process benchmarking. Look at what others are doing, and this information others could share. Do they deploy training? Is their training mandatory? How often do they train their employees, and how do they tackle new hires? What is the duration or the expectation of training on an annual basis? So these are performance benchmarking, process benchmarking measures that are easy to get if you participate in an industry collaboration group or information exchange group. Well, you could conduct a small survey and get that information from your colleagues. Am I doing the best I can? Am I doing what my colleagues are doing in the space and the field? Right? Financial sector may have mandatory training the last 2 hours for every employee on an annual basis with several touch points, right? Whereas maybe manufacturing doesn't have as many requirements and may have less frequent activities throughout the year. So do performance benchmarking after you've done your process benchmarking. When it comes to performance benchmarking, if we look at the results from last year, where we deployed a scenario where users were asked, they received a SharePoint notification that there's a new document available to them. Click on the link to go download the document. And the email was replicated to look like a SharePoint notification. Obviously, the domains were faked, were spoofed. 1 out of 5 individuals clicked on the link that ended up a replica SharePoint website. And on that website, they were willing to share their credentials and download a document. Credential harvesting, potential ransomware infection. Right? Because users still now to this day do not know how to recognize an unsecured website. Right? The site didn't have HTTPS. It didn't have a padlock. In some cases, your browser may even warn you that this site is not secured by changing color. Yet users still clicked at a high rate. Now, we know that 1 out of 5 recipients clicked on the link. We don't know with certainty why the other 4 did not click. Maybe they recognized the phishing message. Maybe it got lost in the sea of email. Maybe they clicked at a later time because they were away. But from those who clicked, now that they landed up on the website, we knew they had to take an action. Do I take the action on the website? Do I follow the instructions? Or am I able to detect it? And almost 75% of the individuals who ended up on the website took an action on the website, which is very concerning because more than 3/4 or close to 3/4 of the individuals were not able to detect the phishing website, which indicates a very high submission rate. In the 2022 event, we did something different. Instead of replicating credential harvesting through SharePoint or Teams or OneDrive, what we did is we did a survey. So we asked employees to complete a survey. It was a one-question survey, very easy to complete, with the promise of a gift card. So, and we see the click rates drop because, people maybe believed it or they know not to click to non-official or unsolicited emails in the work environment, yet still 7% clicked and almost half submitted their work credentials for a promise of a gift card. So this is what their corporate password is worth, right? They did not think about that. Look, I'm putting my company password in this website that is not a company website. It's unofficial, but I'm getting $50 out of it. So, not thinking about the risk that this poses when sharing the password. So very scary that users are willing to share their credentials for personal gain in this matter. And And then we saw the results vary by industry as well. So performance by industry would vary. Nonprofit organizations had the highest among all the participants, and energy, finance, public sectors had the lowest with a 3.5 click rate. Again, education sector, the highest willing to share their password for the promise of a gift card. Again, the financial sector being one of the best ones with the lowest password submission rates. And then if we look also by size, we look at the data with this cohort. Again, we see the larger organizations have the highest click rate. And this could be because they have more employees, more difficulty reaching and training all those employees, or maybe because their employees are used to receiving these type of surveys, right? Large organizations tend to do surveys a lot more often, so maybe it was more pertinent scenario for them as opposed to small organizations who tend not to do these kind of surveys. And this gives the importance of, if you have a phishing simulation program within your environment, to vary the scenarios, because your click rate is your click rate to that specific scenario, right? Different people are going to react different to the different scenarios that you may be deploying. And also the same thing is true for those who submitted the passwords. Large organizations had the highest number and the highest percentage of users who were submitting the password, and as a result, from those who clicked, those submitted was at 39%. Overall, Asia-Pacific region, again, had the highest, on average, click rate, maybe because people were wanted to receive that gift card a lot more than anybody else. And also the same thing with South and Latin America had the highest password submission rate for getting the data. So what does this all information mean? How can we use this information to build a cybersecurity aware culture, where everybody's beliefs, understandings, interpretations is aligned the same and provides the best for our organization? Okay? So, and we don't expect individuals to be cybersecurity experts, but we want them to understand these cyber threats exist and to have them top of mind. Take the time to question things that happen. And it's very important because we want to, at the end of the day, minimize the potential risks associated with these events. We want to remain operational. We want to be able to provide the services that we have committed to providing to our clients. We want to protect the sensitive information that we're handling, whether that of our employees, our clients, or any other third party. And also, we want to, save time from having to respond to incidents. And this is the future because the threats are not going to stop. They're just going to continue to evolve and multiply. So we want our users to be ready at all times, no matter what comes to them, to be able to adapt, detect, and respond appropriately. A lot of times we hear that users are the weakest link. We like to say that they're the most neglected link. Because we tend to invest a lot in technology, a lot of resources, a lot of time, but not as much in educating and training our users. Taking the time to train them at the appropriate moment. You're giving them a new device, well, teach them on how to protect the device when they're traveling or when they're working remotely. They have to reset their password. Well, give them hints on how to select a new password that doesn't just replace the last digit to make it different than the previous one. Right? Give them hints on creating strong passwords at the time they're changing their password. And why are we going to do an information security awareness program? Why do we need to implement it? Well, I'm certain many of you have a security program in place. Well, an awareness program tackles the people component of your program. And the reason why you're doing a program in place in the first place is because you're going to have some external drivers, some external pressures that you cannot control. Adoption of cloud. You have suppliers. You have partners. There's an increased technology, increased complexity, and reliance on technology. Almost everything we do has an online component, right? So these external drivers force us to adapt security and awareness programs. These are elements that we cannot control. In some cases, even privacy regulations may require it. Then you have your internal requirements. You may have an acceptable use policy. Does include the fact that users have to complete training and be aware of security best practices. Attacks, you have no control of the attacks that may be targeting you or your organization. And also, you want to align with your overall mandate for protecting your critical assets and providing the services. So these are your internal drivers. These are the internal reasons that you control why you implement a security program and therefore an awareness program. And then, thirdly, you may have industry requirements for implementing a security and awareness program as well, so in terms of protection of data, or because you're operating in a specific sector that has established certain guidelines that you have to follow. So what are the benefits of having a cybersecurity-aware culture? A lot of organizations, we have a lot of clients that come to us and say, well, my users do not complete the training. They don't want to participate. They don't care. And that becomes of a challenge because if you're deploying your awareness activity, if your users don't care, well, you have to waste cycles and effort chasing them to complete the training. There was one bank that we had dealt with where the CFO would call individually every single person that had not completed the training because it was so important. Obviously, being in the financial sector, he didn't have to make too many calls, but he would take or she would take the responsibility in their hands to call every individual person. And when you're getting a call from the CFO telling you, why didn't you complete the training, you better have an answer. And then your training becomes also more effective because users are interested. They understand that they have the role to play. And not only sit in front of the screen just so they could get that pass and completion checkbox, they're actually engaged and they're trying to consume, understand, and learn what they're seeing, eventually getting a benefit from the program that you've put in place. And it also gives you the ability to comply with external requirements that they may have in place. And also, you don't waste time, money, effort doing activities that provide no value when it comes to protecting information. So products, technology, just deploying an awareness course is not sufficient. You have to implement a program that not only engages your users, but also includes different individuals. It requires a multidisciplinary team, cross-functional team. It requires HR, it requires communications, it requires marketing to be involved. Because again, we talked about changing human behaviors, educating adults. As an IT professional, I have no idea how to change the behavior of an adult, right? I have a hard time with my 10-year-old. I imagine changing someone who's set in their ways, right? So it becomes very difficult. That's why we need to have all those key individuals participating when it comes to developing a program. So having that executive and leadership support when you're designing your program becomes very, very crucial because it's your executives that are going to set the tone at the top, that are going to pass the message along to your users, to their managers, their supervisors, and trickle down all the way down to the users. Simply sending the announcement from the CFO, the CEO, or another executive, it's important enough. As long as that individual is well respected in the organization, his message will be respected as well. So then you will start seeing a shift. You will start to observe changes within the organization, and you will see that cultural shift. So where users are starting to ask questions, they want to know more. They don't know how to do something, and they'll come and they'll ask. Very important also to see that your participation increases on its own without having the CFO calling them or having to send multiple reminders to have your training completed. And then users are starting to share with their colleagues what they've heard. Very important. It's one of the principles. If you observe something that is wrong, take the time. Whether at home, your personal life, or your work environment, don't ignore it when you see the opportunity. The other day, I was at my doctor's office, and she was looking at he was looking at my file on the computer. They stepped away for about 10-15 minutes, and their computer screen was still logged in with my file and just with all my personal information, my medical record, I could have accessed that computer and accessed anybody's record because it was not secured. And when the doctor came back, I felt it like it was my responsibility, not just for protecting my personal data, but as a security practitioner, to make a comment and recommend that they lock their password, their computer before they step away. So when you see someone, when you have the opportunity, share what you know with your colleagues and then everybody else, and don't be afraid to ask questions. To implement a program does require additional support. Cybersecurity teams tend to be lean and even leaner when it comes to those responsible for awareness programs. So having an ambassador program could help. Select content that is fun, interactive, engaging to get users to participate. Create activities that are personalized and ensure that you have ongoing collaboration. So when it comes to providing content that is interactive, creating gamified content like escape rooms, cyber challenges that engage the learner to adopt these new behaviors in a fun and exciting way. Instead of sitting through loads and loads of text, ask them to participate. Have some kind of role-playing games where they could take the place of a cyber threat actor, right, to see what happens in the background, right? Or a red team or a blue team is trying to defend against a threat actor, so they have a better understanding of what it takes. The ambassador program also becomes an extension of the cybersecurity team and a two-way channel where the ambassador could relay back to the security team questions that the users may have. Also, it helps promote awareness activities when they come out, especially for organizations that are distributed in different regions, locations, or offices. And also having the ability to create personalized campaigns. Assessing your users' security awareness index. How much does this person know off the start? Because not everybody knows and understands the same thing. And understanding also the risk score. So what we've created is the ability to rate a user's risk level, rate a user's knowledge, and then determine their cultural index. Based on their threats that they're exposed, the data that they have access, the technology they use, and what they know. How big of a risk are they to my organization? What do I need to do for this individual to bring them to the level, right? Not everybody learns the same way. Not everybody has the same needs when it comes to learning. Also, by doing this, it will prepare your users and your organizations to address any potential threats that they may come across. And you could do this by encouraging your users to ask questions. Right? If they encounter something new, something they have seen before, and encourage them to ask questions, provide the resources that they need, make it easy for them to ask questions. And also, if they notice something that is out of place or they've done something wrong by accident, not to be afraid to communicate it or share it because they're afraid or embarrassed or worried about the consequences. This reminds me of one situation where there was an individual who was compromised by ransomware, and they were so scared and embarrassed by the fact that they actually paid the ransom out of their own pocket to unlock their computer. So they were lucky it didn't spread to the network. So nobody else noticed, nobody else detected it, paid out of their pocket, they got their computer back. The IT department noticed when there was a chargeback for PC repairs. So the user submitted an expense and was claiming $7,000 because they spent money to fix their computer. So teach your users to not be afraid to say something when they notice something. If you'd like to have more information, we have a booth right outside Fortress Terranova Security. We have hard copies of the two reports that I shared with you. The first one is on the Cybersecurity Aware Culture Survey, so we have a physical copy. We also have the report on the Gone Fishing Tournament and the results out of the tournament. Thank you.